All right, we got it the first time. Very good, guys. We are another weekly episode of Conversations with Commodores, and I've got a classmate of mine we came in the fall of '86, graduated in the spring of '90. Of course, I've got Brandi Jackson Scott coming out of the Woodlands in Texas. Good evening, Brandi. It's so good to see you.
Hey there, Bernard. Good to see you as well.
I am so glad that you have joined me tonight. We're going to have a great conversation. We got all kind of good stuff. I have to start. We're going to get into all your story, but I have to start. How in the world were you able to do? Was it back handsprings for 100 yards across the field? How? How do you not? You got to start there. Teach us. Tell us how you did it.
That was my favorite thing. Well, I actually got into cheerleading from being a gymnast, and I think Beth, who you had conversations with previously as well, we kind of got into cheerleading the same way. So cheerleading, actually, dare I say it, was really kind of a backfill for supplementing my gymnastics career. So I came off being a very serious high level gymnast at a very young age, and so after an injury. A knee injury, I wasn't able to do gymnastics anymore. I was kind of given the choice from doctors to, okay, you can walk or you can keep doing gymnastics. And so I got into cheer for that reason, because it still gave me the ability to still kind of throw some of those stunts and flips. And one of my favorite things was just going all the way down the field, doing back handsprings. Now, mind you, it made for very swelled hands and a little bit of dizziness. But it was always exciting, just to kind of do that, just to kind of pump up the volume and with the game and the crowd. But it was always very fun. I think one time I was trying to keep count one time, but you just get too dizzy. You gotta focus.
We had AstroTurf, that horrible AstroTurf back in the day. Was it easier or harder to do the tumbling on AstroTurf or natural grass, like say at Auburn or Georgia back in the day?
Well, you probably have a lot of cheerleaders that tell you that the natural grass was better. But for me, I kind of got used to the turf. In high school, being here in Texas, football is huge. Sure. So you're talking, I've been in high school stadiums that are bigger than some college stadiums, and they all have turf. So, growing up with that, with turf, I say growing up, but going through high school and getting used to tumbling on turf. It actually was a little bit easier for me, just because I think I was used to it. Was it easier on my wrist and my hands? Absolutely not. No, but ideally, the gym was great. Going in the gym is the best. It was the absolute best, because I feel like the gym kind of gives way to you.
Oh, we're definitely going to talk about Memorial Magic in a few minutes, but I want to welcome one of our classmates. Mark Johnson is with us. And we've got, from 1 year behind us, from my hometown, Patrick Fitch says to tell you hello.
Patrick, mwah. I love you. Mwah. Hey, Patrick.
Guys, what you don't know, and I got to brag on Brandi just a little bit, is that we, in the class of '86, Brandi and Courtney Slemons were two of the top cheerleaders in the country. Now, you guys kind of knew each other a little bit in high school, but how did you both, if you know her story, how did you both end up in Nashville as opposed to any number of schools where you could have gone and cheered?
It was pure coincidence. I kid you not. So I met Courtney in the '80s. Our senior year, both our high schools went to the national championship. And you're talking the '80s here. So let me kind of set the stage for you a little bit, because nowadays you hear about cheer championships and competitions and all that. It wasn't that big back then. Back then, it wasn't about all these stunts and all these pyramids. It was, we had those few little things, but we didn't have, 25-person squads and things like that. So in the '80s, her team out of Florida, because she's out of Florida and I'm out of Texas, obviously, both of our squads ended up qualifying for the national championship, which they still had in Disney World in those days. And we both ended up competing also in what they called the National Best Cheerleader competition. Oh, wow. So that was an individual competition. It wasn't a team competition. And we ended up competing in that. We had to do something like, I think it was like a 1-minute routine, create a cheer, tumbling pass and all that. And we met during that competition. There was only maybe, I think, 10 or 12 of us. And we met during that competition. Courtney won, she got first. And I got second place. And that's how we met. We took pictures and had all these gigs that, came along with it. And then sure enough, freshman year moving in, we met each other again. We're like, what are you doing here? No, what are you doing here? There was no method to the madness.
Yeah.
It was all pure coincidence that we ended up going to the same
How,
school.
how
Yeah,
crazy is that? And
it was crazy.
maybe I don't know the history, but I wouldn't think that Vanderbilt historically is a hotbed for awesome cheerleader recruiting. But how cool is that? And particularly back in the day when we didn't have social media and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And you just see, that's funny. Y'all were on the same dorm or the same, were you in Branscombe that year?
I lived in, oh gosh, what was it called? I lived in the single dorms.
Okay.
So I didn't have a roommate, but we met, I think, I want to say it was through, not ViewSet, but we crossed paths moving in. And we didn't even know that each other were going there. But, I want to say, Courtney was very smart in school. And so was I. I mean, well, we already know you got to be fairly smart, to get into Vanderbilt. But one of the things, I mean, I love talking about cheerleaders and I've coached little league cheerleaders and things like that. But I have to admit, Bernard, one of the things about cheering, I sometimes hesitate to say I'm a cheerleader because of the stereotypes that go along with it. And I've never really been one about that, and neither was Courtney really. So when we came to Vanderbilt, it really was about, the credibility of the school, the academia, and all those kinds of things. And I'll tell you my story on how I chose Vanderbilt in the first place. It wasn't all me; it was really my dad. But when it comes to cheer, I always just like to kind of emphasize that because I feel like most cheerleaders, at least back in those days, most cheerleaders weren't like vying to be like, oh, let me be a cheerleader, let me do this, let me do that. It usually fell upon as a matter of another form of athleticism or another aspect of being an athlete. Cheerleaders continue to fight to be considered athletes. I don't think that goes into question anymore, given all the things that they do now in these competitions and the risks that they take.
Crazy.
But it is one of the only forms of athleticism, or it's one of the only sports, as some people will call it, that really isn't regulated at all. And that creates a problem for some folks, a lot of folks, because there's no regulations on how tall you can build a pyramid, if there needs to be a spotter there. I mean, there's numerous stories that some people may have heard of where cheerleaders are paralyzed now and things like that. There's no regulation. We're not it's not an NCAA sport. It's not considered by many to even be a sport. But some of the stereotypes that kind of come along with it, I just, they make me quiver. So I hesitate to say I'm a cheerleader a lot of times because a lot of people associate that, just like I'm sure some of the football players out there get used to being stereotyped. You get stereotyped as a cheerleader as, oh, well, she's ditzy and she's just wild and she's hyper and all those kinds of things. And it's really a matter of, just like a lot of our other athletes that go to Vanderbilt, we go to Vanderbilt with a mission to, yeah, we enjoy doing sports. We enjoy the athleticism of it all and the participation and the team aspect of it. But we're really going to Vanderbilt for the education. And without sounding too cliche, cheer was great. I enjoyed being on the field. I saw some remarkable stadiums while I was at Vanderbilt, especially being in the SEC. It's great. I'm sure a lot of our players that might be listening in can remember, even to a 10th degree of what I'm talking about just walking into some of these big stadiums, the Alabamas, the Floridas, the Auburns. It's just really phenomenal. All of that it's great. It's also great being thrown up in the air and being caught and flipping, especially if you're a gymnast and you like that kind of thing. You don't get scared of that kind of thing. It's great talking about the team and really being into sports. But I feel like a lot of folks kind of take that for granted or don't feel like cheerleaders are into that. And I was always into sports. I've always been an athlete, starting as a gymnast. I mean, it doesn't get more athletic than that.
No,
but starting as a gymnast and running track, and I even played intramurals when I was at Vanderbilt my freshman and sophomore year. So I guess I still struggle a little bit in terms of, yes, I was a cheerleader, but people need to understand that I was an athlete. So just like the football players and the basketball players and the baseball players and lacrosse and soccer and all that, yeah, we get injuries. Yeah, we know about taping up. Yeah, we have to work out. And yeah, we even have to get our body weight weighed and we have to watch what we eat. and all those things too. It's not just all fun and games and throw your pom-poms my way and scream as loud as you can.
I'd like to think that over the decades, it has evolved where cheerleaders are not just seen as people on the sidelines and all bubbly and all that. They truly are athletes. Gosh, some of the stunts and some of the things that they do today are just mind blowing.
Phenomenal.
But you got to take us to your dad's influence on how you ended up at Vanderbilt.
Oh God. So if you were alive today, God rest his soul, he would be cracking up at this because being in Texas, I knew one thing and one thing only. I knew I didn't want to go to a Texas school. No offense against Texas. I just, I've been here going on, gosh, what, 45 years I've been in Texas. So I'm considered a Texan.
Mhm.
But my father worked for IBM. So we moved every 2 years. It was almost like being an Army brat.
Yeah.
He was a salesman for IBM. So I was born in the Midwest in Chicago, and I lived in Wisconsin, New Jersey, Minnesota,
Oh, wow.
all these cold states before coming to Texas. But being here, I was used to traveling, especially with gymnastics. I was used to traveling and traveling internationally. So when I came out of high school, I was like, anywhere but Texas. Not that there was an issue with Texas. I just wanted to see more of the world. I was
Yeah.
just like, I just spent all my school years here, my primary school years here. I want to go somewhere else. So I was looking at the Stanfords and the Princetons, and I was talking to Tony Tillis the other day about, we had a lot of the same goals. I was looking at all these Ivy League schools, and I wanted to go, out of state. And my father actually presented Vanderbilt to me. He said, you need to go visit and consider Vanderbilt. And I'm thinking, that's the name of my jeans. Like, I'm not, what is Vanderbilt? I've never heard of Vanderbilt. What are you talking about? Anyway, he was just adamant, and he ended up making me fill out the application to Vanderbilt. You will fill it out. You will consider this school. So I did one of these here, and then it came time for some recruiting weekends. It actually was one of the first years that they had what they called Black Student Weekend.
Mhm.
The Bishop Joseph Black Cultural Center, really kind of stepped it up and decided they were going to target, some minorities and kind of build the minority base there. And so I got invited to that. I really didn't want to go again. I told my dad, I said, I'll go, but I'm only staying a day. I'm going to
Did
come back home. I don't want to go visit Vanderbilt. I don't know
you
anything
travel
about Vanderbilt.
alone? Did you travel alone to
I
Nashville?
did. I traveled alone to Nashville. And the minute I landed, I told my dad again, I said, I'm coming back home tomorrow. I'm not even staying the whole weekend. He's like, oh, no, you're going to stay. And I got there and I met so many wonderful people, the Susan Chapmans, the Armida Dixies, the Ed McGuires, the Ken Epps. He's like one of the first naval admirals, minority admirals in the country, just some remarkable people. When I think about it now, of course, in hindsight, but we were all there for that first weekend and we had an absolute blast. And I remember calling my dad and saying, I'm going to stay the whole weekend. And from that point forward, I think every last one of us actually decided to accept our offer of enrollment at Vanderbilt that weekend. We decided to accept, and it actually was a little bit of history right there, because I believe we had the very first class of, I believe our freshman class in terms of minorities, Black minorities, that was the first time that actually took us over the hump of being 5% minorities. We had a class of, I think it was about 56 to 60 kids, and that was the biggest minority class that they had ever had at that time.
Wow.
And that was in 86.
Wow. And clearly it's a lot different in current times. Now, I want to back up for just a second. What was your dad's connection, if anything, to the school, to Vanderbilt? How did he know of it or any exposure to it?
He didn't have any connection, but my father he was a very intelligent, very high intellect, did a lot of research, broke down a lot of barriers, just always wanting the best. you know, for his child. I'm an only child, and so was he. Just always wanting the best, wanting you to kind of look beyond what the norm is and just not settling. So, you know, that's a really good question. I wish I had asked him that. I'm not even sure how he found out about Vanderbilt. I imagine it's probably from just a lot of his connections,
Sure,
which
sure.
he has a lot of.
You
Mhm.
know, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall when you get back from Nashville and you're meeting with your parents and you're recounting or recapping the weekend, and your dad's probably like, "Yeah, I knew, I
You know
knew."
what, Bernard? He was so good about it. He never really threw it back into my face. And I was
He
so
was,
grateful for that because I really was kind of ugly about it. I was like,
you were an 18-year-old, you know, we're all that way, but you know what it is he was so dadgum proud of you that
oh,
you
you're
had
sweet.
done what you did. And you know, you're breaking barriers probably like he was back in the day as well. Now
Thanks.
let's fast forward to actually coming to, well, I got to reset. Guys, a couple more Commodores have jumped in. Oh, Joe Peebles. Hey, Big Joe.
Ah, Joe!
We got
Hi,
Christy
Joe!
Hout. We got Fred Well, we got a bunch of folks in here with Brandi, Jackson, Scott. All
Hey,
right,
you guys.
Brandi, it's the fall of '86. I came to school in the summer because I'd had a minor surgery. I needed to rehab. I wanted to take a class and then just get used to college life on campus. It was terrible for me. I hated every minute of it. But then all of a sudden, you know, the light bulb went off over my head, and I loved it. When did you first come to school in that fall? Was it when freshmen were reporting? When did I'm sorry, so many ideas of
No,
questions for you.
that's fine.
When did the cheerleading part of this equation come into be for you?
So I did move in when all the freshmen were reporting.
Mhm,
You know, cheer, you know, it just wasn't at that level at that point.
mhm,
I remember trying out, they had a JV team and a varsity team. I don't even remember if they called it JV. I think they did. But the JV team was pretty much freshmen and sophomores, and then the varsity at that time was juniors and seniors. They weren't very big squads. Wasn't even really thinking about cheer that much coming into Vanderbilt. At that time, you're also talking, you know, again, as you said, you're talking 86. So I can only even think of one school that might be even offered cheer scholarships at that time. I mean, a lot of that has changed.
mhm.
But I think Iowa, maybe even at the time, was the only school that even offered cheer
Wow.
scholarships. So we weren't there early, like a lot of, you know, football players or basketball players might report early during the summer or anything like that. We didn't do any of that. We didn't even know any of that. I believe tryouts were literally maybe a week after we moved
Mhm,
in terms of junior varsity tryouts.
mhm,
And they were basically the big thing back then too, if I can go back, is stunting. So that's where you see typically a male and a female stunting, meaning stunting is when the guy throws you up into whatever kind of stunt it may be considered to be. And that was really a new
mhm.
for most high school girls that had cheered, and even high school boys that might have cheered at that time. We're used to building pyramids and things like that, but stunting takes on its whole nother characteristic. So that was really, really tough in terms of trying out for cheerleading when you've never done that before, because there is a certain process that you got to go through and you got to learn it. It's like learning a new back handspring or a new flip of some sort. You got to learn how to balance your weight. You got to learn how to stay tight. And I'm not used to anybody picking me up. You
Mhm.
know, in high school, I'm fairly strong from being a gymnast. I was used to being in the base.
Mhm.
You know, bases aren't just for the biggest people.
Right.
But I was used to being the base. So it was weird having somebody pick me up. I was like, no, no, you don't pick me up. I pick you up. So there was a little bit of differences there, but we checked in with the rest of the freshman class did. I don't even remember seeing the posting for tryouts, but apparently I do remember how many people tried out. It wasn't a whole lot. We were worried about even having enough to even have a squad because a lot of people just didn't try out. They weren't thinking about college cheerleading. You know, it was just a different era. Nowadays, it's like, what do you mean? Of course, I'm going to go to that school because I want to be on the cheer squad. It wasn't
Right.
like that in the 80s for us.
In our class, I know it was you and Courtney and Sylvia. Were there any other girls from our year on any of those squads?
Yeah, there was one
thinking,
girl that we became very good friends, Jennifer Quick. She
okay.
actually, I can't remember her married name. I think she's been married about 4 or 5 years now. Jennifer Quick. There was another girl named Allie. And some of those folks are listed in that picture. I
Mhm,
feel like, Bernard,
mhm,
those that did try out that freshman year, I mean, for the most part, more than half of them would continue to
mhm,
cheer, for the whole four years. There was
mhm.
only maybe two or three that, they did it for a year, maybe two, and then they had enough. Or they went to focus on their studies or something else. But it was just different because nowadays, you try out one year, you try out every year, it's just expected.
Mhm,
So you don't really see much fluctuation in the squads. But back then it was, and then finding, the men to participate in cheer
mhm.
was an even bigger challenge. And what most people don't realize, because I remember my first job was working for the NCA, that stands for the National Cheerleaders Association. That
Mhm.
was my first job. So I had taught summer camps when I was in high school. I had taught summer camps and things like that. That's how all these cheerleaders across the country learn different cheers, different stunts. And I was an instructor. And I don't think a lot of people realize the very first cheerleader was a man.
Huh.
Yeah. His name was
Wow.
Mr. Herkimer, and that's where you get the herky jump. And all cheerleaders were male. You want to know why? Because women weren't allowed to go to school.
Mhm.
And so a lot of people are like, oh, cheerleaders, I don't know about that being a masculine sport or whatever kind of connotation you want to add to it. But a lot of people don't realize the very first cheerleaders were men.
And fast forward to the 2020s, a good friend of ours recently was cheering for UCF, Central Florida.
Yeah.
And to watch some of those stunts, she's not my child, but when I see how high in the air and all of the twirling, I have to hold my breath because it's not the
Yeah.
going up that's the concern for me, it's the coming down. And she's a wonderful athlete, as is her partner, and they do great stunts.
Mhm.
But oh my gosh, I could not imagine in today being a parent of someone. Guys, I've got Brandi Jackson Scott out of the Woodlands. Brandi, let's talk about being a cheerleader and then trying to acclimate with being a freshman at a serious academic school. I know you were serious as an athlete back in, I mean, as in academics and athletics growing up, but now you're in the SEC, you're at Vanderbilt, you're trying to balance and keep organized your priorities. How long did it take for you to kind of, some of us, it took a long time to figure out how to do it, but share a little bit about that process of getting acclimated to a social life, academic life, athletic life, and then hopefully sleeping at some point each day.
It was tough. And I feel like, even just from listening to conversations past,
Mhm.
I feel like there's a lot of similarities there between athletes that are probably listening in that you've had conversations with. It's the same kind of thing. You're going from, everyone always has that old cliche of you're going from, being the big fish in the little pool to now you're the little fish in the big pool.
Oh, very
And
much
the
so.
same was for me. I mean, I came from a very big high school here in Houston. The Woodlands High School is still a very huge force across the nation. We've got state championships. I don't even know how many we've had in Lone Star Cups, which means we win state championships in more than a dozen sports.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
I mean, cross country, football, baseball, basketball, volleyball, track. I mean, the list just goes on. So I came from that kind of a high school, or that high school literally, where it was very competitive. I grew up my entire life in predominantly white neighborhoods.
Mhm.
I grew very much accustomed to being the only black face, and sometimes that was even questioned. Oh, you're so light skinned. I would get it from both sides. I would get it from black folks, I'm too light. I would get it from white folks, I'm too black. I became very much accustomed to that type of an environment. So going to Vanderbilt, really, I felt like it wasn't too much of an adjustment for me. But
Mhm.
one thing, probably maybe like you, Bernard, was I was a little slow to adjust academically
Mhm.
because you come in and you're used to making good grades, and now you're in school and it's different for everyone. I tell my kids all the time, look, you got to kind of figure out your niche because it's going to be different. You're not you're used to studying one way for high school and that may work for you. But when you get to college, it's going to be different.
Yeah.
And so I was a little slow, I feel like, to pick that up. I remember being in a regular English course and a remedial English course because I didn't score as high as I needed to on the English aspect of the SAT. And so that was weird. And then, you're getting into cheer and you're just being thrown into this huge conference, the SEC conference, and games and all this publicity. And you're kind of like, whoa, wait a minute, let me take a step back.
Mhm.
And then you're also trying to focus on, making new friends, especially when you're going out of state. I was just talking to my pastor about this on Sunday. His son is in college and he's like, he's just got to learn how to make friends. When you're going out of state,
Yeah.
you're forced to start all over with your
Yeah.
friends. When you're going out of state, you don't just have your regular old friends, local friends around you. So it's a lot to kind of soak in. And I think had it not been for the Vanderbilt environment, which I feel like it's kind of a bittersweet. It's competitive to where you got to do something to keep up.
Yeah.
You don't want to fail anybody or you don't want to be the odd man out. But
Yeah.
at the same time, it's also, I feel like, very conducive to pushing you.
Mhm.
And so I'm just very grateful for those friends that I did make during that weekend because, we kind of helped each other kind of get along. Hey, how are your grades going? You always got that friend saying, hey, make sure you go to
Well,
bed early or start
I was-
that project.
yeah.
And then you have coaches,
Mhm.
that are reminding you to keep those things intact as well. And then you always got the friends that are like, hey, come on, you need to go out. You haven't never done anything.
That's right.
So it's just a balance, I think, of all of that. But to answer your question, Bernard, in a roundabout way, I feel like I was probably a little bit slow on that and picking up the whole academic side of it. I felt like I kind of started okay, but then it started to really kind of take its toll on me. So I had to take a step back
Mhm.
and kind of refocus and figure out what I needed to do here.
Did you have, I don't know the proper term, a big sister or a mentor on the varsity your freshman year? Did they do anything like that?
I really did not. I really did not. I would say my friends, cheer was great and we collaborated, but I feel like we were all kind of coming from different backgrounds and opportunities that made us a great team and a nice family, especially on the road with all the
Yeah.
traveling and whatnot. But when it came to just kind of adjusting, I found myself, Bernard, for the first time, really probably having more Black friends than I was accustomed to,
Mhm.
that I really relied on in terms of really kind of opening my eyes to some things that, what, you need to, we all need to kind of get together and make opportunities for each of us or for the future. And those were things that I think I probably took for granted, even growing
Yeah.
up. And I just gotten so used to it. That's what I mean by take for granted. I gotten so used to it. My parents raised me that, you just need to be you and be your best self. And if somebody doesn't like you because of your skin color or your height or your looks or whatever it may be, then that's their problem and not yours. So I was always raised to just kind of blow some things off in terms of, okay, well, let them deal with that. But I think coming to Vanderbilt, it really kind of opened my eyes to some things that, what, you don't necessarily just blow off.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to pause because there's so many who've rolled in that want to say hello to you, but I
Oh,
do want to
good.
come back to this. Derek
Yeah.
Sartor says to tell you hello.
I gotta get to the DR, man.
You do. We got Coach Jeff Madden. We got
Hey, Coach
Chris Kraus and we got OJ Fleming. Let's see if
Chris
anybody.
Krause, man. I read your books, man. I remember even I was trying to get in front of I get my son in front of or talk with the high school coach. I remember when my son was playing football and I brought Chris's book with me, Athletes Wanted.
Mhm.
I was like, look, let me just show you this book. This is written by a colleague. He went to Vanderbilt as well. Nice to meet you,
Awesome.
Chris.
And I'll say it for Chris, when you're ready to learn how to surf in Manhattan Beach, California, just hit him up and he will take you out there, I'm sure.
Oh, nice.
Brandi, I want to go back to what you were just bringing up because I think it's a very important piece of your story.
Mhm.
You get to Vanderbilt and that recruiting visit, the BSA,
Yeah.
and you find a lot of people who maybe are coming from different backgrounds around the country, but you all have a lot of similarities in that you share common bonds for many reasons.
Yeah.
there, and here's my question. Growing up, maybe you overlooked certain things, or things were just not either brought to your attention that needed to be dealt with from a race relations, or whatever socially there is. But in college, a lot of times we find those issues and we explore those issues. That's what college is about. The
Yeah.
good, the bad, and the ugly, whatever it is.
Right.
So first question, I guess, would be, share with us the importance to you of the BSA during that time period. And I know that that those collaborations opened your eyes to deal with issues, because, and I've had this conversation on this show before. The 60s, 70s, and 80s were not kind to minorities on our campus because there were such few in numbers.
Right.
But things have evolved over the many years, but it was the students from that time period that led to what the current students are now able to do. So I'm sorry for being so long-winded, but go back to the importance of the BSA and what kind of things that were now your eyes were being open to, and you're dealing with those back then.
Well, you touched on a lot of points there, Bernard. I mean, the BSA did a lot of wonderful things, and they still continue to do so, as we evolve out of it. I have to be selfish, though, in saying that the BSA kind of had a little bit of a different impact for me. Yes, you have the impact of the BSA, contributing to, the apartheid scenario that we did, and the walks, and the awareness. And we had a lot of collaborations with neighborhood or local schools like Tennessee State and Meharry, and things like that. We worked together. We created Black Greeks, to bring a lot of that history on board. We brought a lot of artistry and a lot of culture to the community in terms of just increasing their awareness about all that. Rites of passage or rites of spring, things like that. We had our different things that we did with regards to that. And those are all great things. But I got to be honest, for me, it was actually kind of the opposite. It opened my eyes to my own self-awareness. Because again, it wasn't so much that I would just, again, the way that I was raised, I was taught, look, you need to be strong enough to endure. And don't get me wrong. I mean, I've had my fair share of stories. I've had my fair share of challenges. But I've always felt like I've been the strong one to say, you know what? Forget you. I can't worry about what you're thinking about me.
Yeah.
And I even recently, during the 2020 with the George Floyd scenarios and all those things, that became a very precious period for me, because I feel like a lot of people showed their true colors, whether it was on social media, or I had a lot of high school friends that just kind of made really kind of odd comments to me, comments that previously I probably would have just been like, okay, you know what? That's their issue. Not to say that they didn't bother me, but and not to just blow them off like they weren't a concern of mine. But my parents were busy teaching me, don't get yourself all riled up about all these things. They're going to happen. Be prepared, because they're going to happen. We just don't want you to lose you and your goals and what you're trying to do, getting all wrapped up in all that mess.
Oh, how smart.
But for 2020,
wow,
it was really a revelation for me. And I'll get back to the BSA thing in just a second. But for 2020, I just felt like a lot of people were showing their true colors. And it was really my first time. And I believe I had a little rant on Facebook, which I don't normally do. I don't use Facebook to political ranting and all that, but I did have a rant at one point. I participated with a lot of my Vanderbilt friends, which there's about 16 of them that now live in Houston, and we still hang out. We see each other about 2 or 3 times a month.
Oh, how
so
cool.
It's pretty wonderful. But I did have a little rant because George Floyd is from Houston, and so I actually we participated, a lot of us Vanderbilt folks, we participated in the very peaceful walk. We didn't have any issues, no police brutality or anything. But it was just amazing to me that the same people that I had gone to college with, that I had gone to high school with, would just say things like, I'm not even sitting right there. Or like, I'm not even, that they're not even realizing what they're saying. Yeah. And now, mind you, let me go back a little bit. And I don't want to toot my own horn. I'm saying these things to make a point.
Mhm.
I was very popular in high school. My high school was huge at that time. My high school was so big that there was 1,000 of us that came out of 8th grade, and this was in 82.
Mhm.
We were so big that they built another high school. They split my class in half.
Wow.
And so by the time I graduated from McCullough High School, which is now the Woodlands High School, the Woodlands is a #1 place to live.
Mhm.
There's about almost 200,000 people that live out here in the Woodlands now. It's called a city within a city.
Mhm.
We were the second Black family to move here when there was 5,000 people here, literally the second Black family.
Mhm.
But yet I was very popular. I was smart. And I was there was 2 Blacks in my graduating class of 552 kids.
Wow.
And I was the second one.
Yeah.
And coming from that kind of a background, I got very much accustomed, or I say it wasn't uncommon
Mhm.
for my Caucasian classmates to say, "Oh, you're one of us." I'm not trying to be one of you.
Mhm.
What are you doing me a favor?
Mhm.
And then the Black kids, which my class, when we got separated, when they split and built the new school, there's a neighborhood
Mhm.
on the other side of the Woodlands where a lot of the Black kids were from.
Mhm.
So when they split my class, the new high school served those Black kids.
Mhm.
But when I went to high school, I was still going with those of them that didn't get split.
Right.
So I would get into fights, literally. I'll never forget 7th grade. I was sitting in the bus line and I literally got pushed on the bus for being too white, for looking too white. So I'm very much accustomed to getting it from both sides.
Mhm.
The Black folks, I'm not dark enough. I'm light skinned. I got green eyes. God forbid. Are those fake? Are those real? You're not Black. All those things. Yes, my parents are Black, both of them. It's
Mhm.
not a mix. It's 100%. It's pure. I'm Black. Yes, I have green eyes. Yes, I'm Black. And then the white kids, "Oh, well, you're just too light. You're going to be like us." I'm not trying to be like you. No offense, but I'm not. I'm me. And so coming from that kind of a background
Mhm.
and just trying to zone out all of those stereotypes and try to fend for myself, I used to get in fights. They used to pick fights with me. The Black kids did
Mm.
pick fights with me. I had to fend for myself. I had to learn how to fight. You don't want to mess with me. But I had to learn how to fight and just prove that I'm not just this light skinned, green eyed cheerleader, smart. I'm not a Barbie doll. And so coming from that and coming to a school like Vanderbilt, I just kind of built this immunity,
Mhm.
a strong immunity to say, you know what, I don't have the patience for that kind of stuff. Let me focus on what I'm doing. Even as a gymnast, I was very much focused on what I was trying to accomplish, going to the Olympic trials and all those kinds of things. It was just a very strong focus, just like any other athlete.
Mhm.
So the BSA for me, I bring all that up because the BSA for me was an enlightenment to say, hey, you know what? Enough is enough. You do need to speak out.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so it was a matter of bonding for the first time for me
Mhm.
with more of my Black peers.
Mhm.
It wasn't a conspiracy. We weren't all radical and just trying to raise hell for no reason. We were educated students
Mhm.
that talked about issues, and we made plans. And if you didn't want to participate, you didn't have to, and there was no pressure. But you were a part of a group that really dug into what is the purpose of this and why is this happening, or what can we do to change it, or we have to take baby steps, or yeah, okay, we're going to go do this the radical way, and no, you want to be part of the group, we're going to do this the right way, or we're going to do it by procedure, or we're going to follow proper protocol. And so the BSA for me was a learning experience. It was an opening up of really finding out more about my culture and realizing that the things that I had gone through weren't just, you know, odd happenings. They happen to people all the time, regardless of how dark skinned you were or how light skinned you were. So that's what the BSA was for me, in addition to all the other things that the efforts and the time and the commitments that we made towards, making life better for those that are students right now.
Sure. No, thank you for
I know that
sharing.
was a mouthful.
No, thank you for sharing that, Brandi. Would it be fair to say, and to correct me if I'm wrong, you've always had your voice, even as a child, you had your voice, you had your position, your stance, your understanding.
Mhm.
Did that experience at Vanderbilt through the BSA and other parts of campus life help you to refine your voice, to kind
Oh,
of
absolutely.
evolve it over time, as maybe as you matured, as we all, we
Oh,
all
yeah.
come into college on some level of being a knucklehead, and hopefully by the time we graduate, we've refined our
This is true.
knuckleheadedness into a
Yeah.
little more maturity. Guys, I've got Brandi, Jackson, Scott. Both of us came in the fall of '86, graduated in '90. I want to go to the on the field stuff, if that's okay. Kind of pivot for
Yeah.
a
Let's
minute.
do it.
I want to talk about, I know you guys not only cheered for football, but also during our years at Vanderbilt were some magical basketball seasons. And
Yes.
we got to talk about Memorial Magic. We got to talk about Barry Goheen and Booker and Purdue and Cornette and Drought and all those
Yeah.
awesome games. They just celebrated the 87-88 team that went to the Sweet 16. What a magical season that was. Must have been for you guys as well. So I'm going to shut up for a minute, and I want you to talk about, let's talk about basketball and what that experience was like for a bit.
Oh my gosh, it was amazing. I think, that's one of the biggest perks I feel like of being a cheerleader, is that, you get to collaborate and you get to celebrate in with all the athletes that are, taking you places, like literally. It's not even about necessarily winning championships and things like that. It's just part of being, part of the SEC, and seeing all these beautiful stadiums and these beautiful gyms and experiencing that. But that year of going to the NIT was just amazing. Cheering in Madison Square Garden, a lot of historical things. And I used to live in New Jersey, so I was familiar with the hot dogs and the corned beef sandwiches and the pizza and the Yahoos and and all the Yoo-hoos, and all that, those kinds of things. But, being in Memorial Gym, because of its design, um, it's you were alluding earlier about how scary it can be having a child and cheer and just seeing how high they go. One of my biggest and best memories was being in Memorial Gym and doing the basket tosses where the guys throw one girl up. And we would go so high, you felt like you were flying.
Oh,
And all you see are people underneath you, because with Memorial Gym being sunken,
yeah.
you're at an even elevated, you're even higher up, more so than you would normally be. And just the tumbling, and I used to throw layouts, which are where you go upside down, a backwards flip where you're straight. And I just used to love the hang time. Pew, boom. And I remember saying that in my mind, here I go, boom, boom. And it was just remarkable. And then I think the biggest thing about cheering for Vanderbilt has been the people that I've gotten to meet, getting close to the Will Produce, talking with them, even having classes with them. The same thing for football, the Everett Crawford, the Eric Jones. I remember even going to Florida one year, I think it was my junior year or maybe my sophomore year, and witnessing Emmitt Smith, not thinking anything twice about it. But now, then when he got drafted, I was like, oh my gosh, I like stood right next to him. That, that's when you get those kind of lily gilly cheerleader moments, I guess you could call them, because it's just remarkable, just the experience in itself. And so I'm sure a lot of your, former athletes, whatever sport they're in, they can remember coming out onto the field or coming out onto the gym and being announced, and you're in these fabulous locations and facilities, millions of dollars. Cameras are on you, but I really didn't focus on that so much. It was just all the experience. It's almost like a kid that gets a backstage pass to a concert. It was just really overwhelming in such a great way. And those are things that, you'll always have those memories for. So I can relate to a lot of that. I wasn't in a helmet and I wasn't in shorts, or carrying a bat, but those experiences were just as fabulous for us as they were, for a lot of your athletes that might be listening
Well, you
in.
guys had as good of a view of the
We
action as
did. We had the best view.
anybody. We got one of our classmates. We got to welcome Fred Peterson is here. Says
Oh,
to you hello. And
yes.
Steve
Hi,
Law,
Fred.
Slaw Dog, is in the house.
Ah,
Now, I want to talk about Saturday night after Vanderbilt basketball games. I know you were there. You don't have to admit it, but I know you were there at the steroid parties in the towers.
I'm not saying a word.
Okay, you can just shake your head one way or another. Okay, I know you don't remember Jeff Mays being the DJ, and that's what I thought. And
Yeah,
how fun. Now, in all seriousness or lack of,
mhm.
those parties, as goofy as they were, as fun as they were, I've talked about this with others, that really was a safe environment, all things considered.
Yeah.
We weren't driving. We were self-contained, although quite obnoxious and loud. But I would never want to be an RA like Flavor or anybody else. But those were some innocent, just super fun times. Now I want to take you, and again, you don't have to answer anything you don't want to. I do want to welcome Christy Halk and I want to welcome Kenny Cole. Thank you guys for coming tonight. I went to more than one step show on campus. And I want to say maybe the first one they ever had on campus was during one of our years.
Yeah.
I want you to share your experience about either participating in them or attending them, whether it was on campus or maybe at Fisk or TSU or somewhere else. Right. Why were those important and how much fun were they?
I mean, for me, I think of one word when I think of step shows, I think of one word, and that's pride. There's just so much behind it. And it's one of those things where, if someone that doesn't understand it or has never experienced it, it's really kind of hard to describe because there's just so much history and culture behind it. And so much diligence and practice and expertise that kind of goes back. I mean, it's a skill of its own. And so I remember I didn't participate in those because I pledged a traditionally white sorority. I was one of the 4 that kind of broke those barriers with regards to that, integrating a lot of the Greeks at Vanderbilt. But that didn't mean I wasn't a part of the Black Greeks. There was a lot of firsts, as you alluded to yourself, Bernard. While we were in school, that's where, Kappa, the Kappas, KA Psi, that's where they got founded, the Omegas actually, kind of blew up on campus around that time. We didn't have Sigmas at that time. It was just those 3, the Alphas, the Kappas, and the Omegas. But it was just a really strong sense of pride. And I remember going over to the Peabody College because that's where we used to host a lot of the parties for the BSA, or whether it was Meharry coming over or Tennessee State having their parties. And a lot of those were, they were Black parties. And it was just an opportunity to really love and enjoy our music, so to speak. That's when Bobby Brown was real big. I'll never forget. He came and did a concert on campus. We used to watch FAMU, Florida A&M University, play in our stadium. Now that I think about it in hindsight, I think about how I'm grateful that Vanderbilt opened up those opportunities, even though I know they probably didn't come easy, opened up those opportunities for a lot of the, HBCUs to come and share our facilities and utilize our facilities and help us grow our culture. But watching step shows was not only just fun, just watching it, but getting your groove on and just really looking around you and really soaking in all the culture and your friends and folks that are that's their own sense of pride that nobody can ever take away from them. I mean, it's, you get it whether you're on a team or if you're in a different type of fraternity or a sorority or a family, that those were our families at that time. When we didn't have family, the Greeks became our family. Those became your true frat brothers. It was really just more than that. I mean, it's a bond that the biggest difference I think I find in my traditionally white sorority, and it's probably my fault because I don't get as involved as I probably could. But the biggest difference is that, yes, I have sorority sisters. Yes, I do talk to them. One of my sorority sisters is Carolyn Perot. Another one is Amy Grant. But the difference is I feel like the Black Greeks, they maintain that bond like forever. Like those are their best friends, like forever. Forever. It's a true bond.
The shows that I went to, 2 things really struck me. One, how much fun everybody was having doing, whether they were doing the dances in unison and just the precision, or the folks in the audience just having so much fun. But the second was there was so much athleticism performed, and it was in such concert with each other, no matter, I don't know how many hours of practice, but clearly they were teams.
Yes.
And it just, again, just showed, like you said, pride.
Yeah.
Now,
A lot of pride.
I couldn't get Edie to admit this. I couldn't get Beth to admit this. So I need your help here.
Okay.
I want to talk about how much fun the cheer squads had on away games, particularly Tulane, New York. We can start there and we'll see if there's other cities that come to mind. Again, maybe you guys were sworn to secrecy. I couldn't get anything out of them, but now is your time to come clean on whatever you want to share. And it doesn't sound like much, but just how much fun were those trips for you guys?
They were a blast. They were an absolute blast. I'll share two things with you. And I think I won't get persecuted for these two things, but two things that I really remember about road trips that I can share. One of them is we used to drive to these things. We used to get rental cars. And so, taking rental cars, you don't really take exactly the best care of rental cars as you would your own car. So we had a little joke, forget it, it's a rental, and so there were times where we would talk about our rentals. And then the other thing is, and this isn't funny at all, but well, it is to me. But I remember every single away game, the big thing was to go to Olive Garden. And to this day, you cannot pay me enough money to go to Olive Garden. I will not eat Italian food to save my life. I got so burnt out on Olive Garden. I won't touch it. I don't eat pasta. I look at it funny. I will cook it because I cook every day for my family. But their pasta thing, I have my own little thing. I will not touch pasta.
Funny.
You can't bring me to an Olive Garden. I've had enough of that in college.
Back in the day on Sundays, our food was, we didn't have a dedicated place to eat on Sunday. So for dinners, and they'd give us these food coupons to Mr. Gaddy's Pizza or Fuddruckers or a third place I can't remember. But I would not. Nope. I'm done with those.
I can't do it. I just can't do it. Yeah. I got burned out on that stuff, but I'm pleading the fifth on the other things. Yeah,
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Brandi, we've got a few more minutes, and I appreciate you sharing your story with us tonight. I'm going to ask you about, I want you to be a proud mom for a minute, but we're going to get to that in just a second. I want to finish the Vanderbilt years or talk with after you graduated.
Mm-hmm.
And into adulthood and even now, what does it mean to you? What has it meant to you to have gone and cheered at Vanderbilt and graduated and had that degree on the wall all those years? Because you've done so many, we haven't even gotten to what you've done in your adulthood, but what has it meant to you to have been at Vanderbilt and graduated from there?
I gotta say, had you asked me that question, about 30 years ago, I probably was like, oh, it's great. I'm thrilled to be a Vanderbilt. But I feel like as I've gotten older, it really just it's just dawned on me how, how grateful I really am, to have that degree. At one point, and sometimes I still feel this way. I feel like, I got my degree. I didn't go and get a master's degree, and I didn't go to law school, and I didn't go to med school or anything like that. And I have a lot of friends who have, almost all my Vanderbilt friends, I feel like they have master's degrees or more than one of them, or they're lawyers or they're big time doctors, and all those things are great. At one point, there was a few moments where I'm like, gosh, I feel like such a failure. I didn't do any of those things. When I got out of Vanderbilt, going into Vanderbilt, I wanted to be it was always important to me to be one of the first. I was trying to be the first Black gymnast to go to the Olympics. I didn't get a chance to make it because of my knees, but I actually, Diane Durham, who you may not have heard of, or you may have heard of, she was actually the first Black Olympic gymnast. She actually got hurt during the Olympic trials. She passed away a couple years ago. But she was the really true Olympian that Bella Caroli was really focused on before Mary Lou even came into the picture. And so I got to live out my dreams that way. But I was really trying to be one of the first or make history in terms of sports casting. You know, women didn't do sports casting back in those days. And I majored in communications, but at Vanderbilt Communications, they have it now. But back then, they didn't have like a journalism major or whatnot. It was called interdisciplinary communication. And it was a combination of linguistics and political science. So basically, I learned about the influencing people and communicating. And I always say there's a million ways to say the same thing. And that's kind of paid off in the end. But, you know, coming out of Vanderbilt back then, I was just thinking, okay, great, I graduated, what's next? But now as I'm getting older and I'm getting more settled and I'm ready to, you know, start, you know, living my life, you know, after raising children and taking care of parents and things like that, it's really just kind of dawned on me, you know what, that's pretty spectacular. And then I participated in the core alumni recruiting program, one of the first, and I don't think I would have been able to get into Vanderbilt now.
No, that
I
was
know I
good.
wouldn't have. There's no way. There's no way. I
No,
talk
it's
to kids that have
crazy.
patents and they've done documentaries, and I'm like going, wait, what? Like you're 17 years old.
All I did was throw a football. I don't have anything else I can offer.
So, you know, I mean, those kinds of things, I'm so very grateful that I had the opportunity and that things kind of aligned up the way that they did, with my father talking me into it and having the friends that I did, and just listening to these conversations and really realizing that, you know what, a lot of us had the same kind of intent. We went through a lot of the same struggles. And here we are, and we're doing amazing things. We're making history. We're changing the world. We've made things a lot different, things that I just wasn't thinking about, you know, 30 years ago.
No, sure. We, you know, as time goes on, we all, I think, maybe better appreciate that time.
Yeah.
I do want to welcome Tony Piercy is with us right now. TP.
Tony.
I don't mean to jump around. We do have a couple more minutes. I totally forgot to ask you, what was it like being on the homecoming court and having your father there our senior year? How cool was that?
That was important. That was important to me. I think about that now more than ever, now that my father's no longer with me. But that was not only was it felt like it was surreal, because, you know, Courtney won homecoming queen that year. And there was three of us, I believe, oh no, two of us out of my same sorority. Courtney and I ended up pledging the same sorority as well. But so there was two of us from our sorority, and there was a lot of support there. But I actually represented the Vanderbilt football. It's who nominated me to represent them in the court. And so just being on that field, I was just really kind of soaking it all in. It was very surreal. There was a lot of thoughts going through my head, thoughts about, wow, you know, how do people really feel about you? Or, wow, you know, just this is amazing. I don't see too many Black faces doing this. I think the first Black homecoming queen was in 71. So there was some history before I got there, but it was surreal. I don't know what other way to explain it. It was one of my best memories, especially with my father being by my side and knowing that he's the one that convinced me to go there in the first place. He was probably very, very excited.
But you know what really is even more special is the fact that back then in 89, you appreciated it in the moment.
Right.
And because you did, it's still a vivid and most excellent memory for you now. That's very, very cool. All right, proud mama moment. I know you got a Texas A&M Aggie in the house.
I do.
Let's hear about those kids.
So, you know, well, you know, I'm divorced. I was married for 15 years and I've been divorced for 15 years. So I'm kind of right on the cusp of all those things. Nothing ugly. I'm just grateful, you know, to kind of have my life. So I pretty much became a single mom, so to speak. I got some assistance from my husband in the later years, but My son is about to be 26. He looks just like his father, God help us. But he's a great kid. He was very, very talented in football. I mean, my ex-husband played in the pros, and then with me being track, gymnast, all those kinds of things. I have two very athletic children. He ran track, powerlifting, football. He's a little guy, but he was a fast guy, 4.3, 40. But it just wasn't in the cards for him, I guess.
Sure.
I wish I had had a little bit more help when it came to recruiting him and all those kinds of things, because I feel like recruiting is a science now. You hear that, Chris? Recruiting is a science.
But
But
wait,
it
he
just
did
wasn't
play
in.
college football and he won some
He
championships.
did. He did. He went to Mary Hardin Baylor, which was a
Huh?
smaller school. I had wished, I think we've all talked about in the past. I've listened to your conversations about people envisioning, the D1s and all those kinds of things. And given his size, he was only 5'5", and given his size, it just wasn't really in the cards for him. But he did have a nice little bout at Mary Hardin Baylor, which is a D3 consecutive champion all the time. You actually have a lot of kids that are graduating, that are getting drafted actually from D3 schools now. So we're grateful for that. He's got two big old championship rings, and he lets me wear them and touch them and look at them. But he really doesn't think about it anymore. He's kind of gotten into his own self, not to reveal too much, but he kind of had a tough time over the past few years. He lost about 6 friends in a period of 18 months.
Oh my.
And at the age of I think he was barely not even 20 when all those things happened. One was his childhood friend, a girlfriend, another football friend, different, just different circumstances. It was really, really weird. And so I'm extremely proud of him, because I don't even think as an adult it's hard to even go through that much of a loss in such a short time period. And he was just still a teenager. So he's coming out of that, and coming into his own. He left the nest about 6 months ago, got his own apartment, although
Who was that harder on, his mother or him?
he actually did it on his own, although we did have a little talk about it a couple of years ago. But so he's not too far from us, but he's a supervisor at one of the big resorts out here. He's
Excellent.
worked his way up very well. He's got a great work ethic. I'm very, very proud of him, even though he does call me about 5 times a day and ask me how to cook this and how to do that. But he's wonderful. And then my daughter just graduated from A&M, God help us. So, SEC, I'm like, y'all are late to the party.
Wait, is she in the transfer portal or she graduated?
She graduated.
Okay.
She graduated. So she played volleyball. She was real
Uh-huh.
big in track and volleyball and even basketball in high school. But she played volleyball for Texas A&M. She was great. She played for the Woodlands High School. They went to state several years and whatnot. But long story short, she graduated this past May, and she's taking a gap year or two to get ready for med school. So she's working for a private practice, and she keeps me sane. She keeps me saying, at one point in my life, I wanted all boys, and I'm just really grateful that God blessed me with a girl, because I don't know if I would take care of myself as well as as she does if I didn't have that girl. But they're amazing. I'm very, very proud of them, like anybody else would be. It just happened so quick, Bernard.
Yeah.
Just very quick.
What did they say, that the days are long, but the years are fast?
Yeah, that's a good saying.
It really is not. I wish I could take credit, but it is so true. I want to welcome Tom Fitz. Number 7 is in the house. Thank you, Tom. Guys, we're finishing up with Brandi Jackson, Scott, and Brandi. Up to this point, I just thank you so much for sharing your journey, for sharing your Vanderbilt experience. And I guess I want to close with just a couple of things. Do you ever get back to campus? You had mentioned you still got a big group of you guys in close to home. You get together. Are you connected with anything that's currently going on with campus? Are you have you been back anytime in the last few years?
I have not, Bernard. And not only am I embarrassed about that, but it's something that I just really have been longing to do. As a matter of fact, it was the first time I went to campus, back to campus. I think it was like maybe 2 years after I graduated, like in 92. I haven't been back since. So when I was doing a lot of the core recruiting, the alumni recruiting, I was very much so reliant upon pictures and talking with people. I even conducted a lot of the college fairs out here in the local area and was the only representative. So answering questions was like, wait, what? Now, We
Yeah.
have this new, so I'm familiar with a lot of the new things, but I haven't seen them myself. And the one year in 2020, when I was planning on going to the reunion, was when COVID hit,
Mhm.
and I just haven't been back since. Part of that is because, usually during homecoming
Yeah.
is October, so I'm usually wrapped up in volleyball or football or something like that. But I made a promise to myself and even my little Vanderbilt friends that, I got to get back to Vandy. I got to go see it. My daughter actually is dating a gentleman that's from Nashville, so he even got to show her the campus. So I kind of have a little attitude about that, but
Well,
I'm gonna let
let
see the
me,
dogs fly.
I've been back to campus numerous times in the last several years. Give yourself plenty of time to walk the campus because your jaw is going to drop because things are not where they used to be. Buildings are new, and you're going to be, at least for me, my impression is very impressed with it.
Well, I got a little sentimental when I saw the demolition of Carmichael Towers. I just went,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, Brandi, I think that's going to bring us to an end this evening. I have so enjoyed our conversation. So thank you for joining us on Conversations with Commodores.
well, thanks for inviting me again. Hello, everyone. Good to see you guys. Thanks a lot, Bernard.
Hang on while I sign off. I got some things to share with you when we
Okay,
finish.
deal.
We've got next week, guys, we're going to talk about the new Anchor Collective. I've got Jason Burns and another individual who are part of it or in charge of it. So much to learn. And I saw an announcement today that 3 of our key players are coming back. They just signed with the collective: Will Shepard, CJ Taylor, and AJ Swan. And that just bodes well for Team 3 for next year. I'm taking off in 2 weeks, but all January and February are already booked. So just keep coming back on Tuesday nights. And y'all anchor down. Y'all have a good night.
Yeah.